Gary Marr, we've been talking a little bit about the housing correction in the United States. Off air, the conversation continued. Love to get your point of view on what you see driving things both south of the border and closer to home.
Well, I'd say closer to home, we should be looking at the idea that the federal government is increasing the number of immigrants permitted to come to Canada by hundreds of thousands over the next few years. I think by and large, Canadians are supportive of this. I think it's a good thing for growing our economy, but housing starts are not going to keep pace with the number of new people needing a house. And during our break, Sandra talked about the idea that, some people should be thinking about renting, and some of the things that municipalities are doing to increase density. Building lane houses here in the city of Vancouver is quite a popular thing now. Increasing density, conversion. Sandra talked about, conversion of office buildings to apartment buildings. Depending on the building, that can be easier. It can be very difficult to do, depending on how it's structured. But I think municipalities are looking at all of these. But housing is an issue that requires a much greater coordination among three different levels of government. No one level of government can solve this problem. It has to be the federal government's working with provincial governments and looking at municipalities as real partners, and not just and not just stakeholders in the issue of finding affordable housing for Canadians, which should be among the top of the list of politicians to be thinking about.
Yeah, Sandra, do you want to jump in on this? Because you did raise that point that maybe our expectations on housing have to change.
Well, and I only say that, my origins are European. Where people today in Europe think it's perfectly okay and dream of having a rental that they're going to stay in for years and years. We don't have that mentality in Canada. We think that home ownership is the bee's knees. Like, that's what we should all aspire to. And that's not necessarily good for everybody. We were saying earlier how this housing price increase was actually very fruitful for a lot of people who sold and decided to get into renting. So, and that is seniors. So depending on what your status is in life, ownership isn't necessarily for you. But as Gary was mentioning, our tax system is structured to benefit home ownership. And maybe we need to think about how we can change that. People who are coming over, when we're opening the doors to immigration, they have a very different expectation level of how their first few years are going to be. And in fairness, they're prepared to rough it a bit until they've got money in the bank, and then they start jumping into home ownership. So I think we've got to look back to the stories of our parents and how they came here and they had 5 or 7 people living in an apartment. They thought that was fantastic. We don't want to go back to that. The beauty of all this immigration is they're actually going to come and work. And that's something that we desperately need. And they're prepared to take jobs, frankly, that Canadians are not stepping up to the plate right now. And our businesses are feeling the pinch. Hours of service being shuttered just because they can't find people to help them keep the doors open. So, we can see how it's going to make it a little more competitive, yes, but more opportunity, because I think that kind of competition means more opportunity to build.
Joe, any final thoughts on this topic before we move on?
Yeah, look, there's an obvious disconnect between our immigration policy, which is to move the number up to 500,000. I think in the last 12 months, it was something in the order of 450,000. So, we're bringing in very, very large amounts of people, and we're not there with the infrastructure to house them. And one of the problems, Gary alluded to the need for cooperation between the three levels of government. What we have to do, of course, is to increase supply. And one of the impediments to increasing supply is red tape and the regulatory burden. And that's often at the municipal level. But municipalities are the creation of the provinces, so the provinces can do more about solving that problem. I mean, that's not going to change the entire world, but it's going to make it better to permit construction to happen more rapidly. Now, on Sandra's point, yes, there is a cultural difference between Canada and Europe, but we have a lot more space. We're the largest, country by landmass in the world. Now, a lot of it is relatively uninhabitable, but we still have quite a bit of space, and people here came to be part of the Canadian or American dream.
And we've got space for more ads that have to go, unfortunately, Joe, so I'm going to have to cut you off there. We'll be back for our final segment right after the break. Please stay with us.